Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean DeBias, coming to you live from Revive's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome Elana Drell Szyfer. She's the CEO of the luxury brand Revive. Really cool brand that we're going to talk about. Not to be confused with Revive, who is also the sponsor of this program, which is a beauty tech company in Helsinki. So we'd really like to welcome you. It's good to see you. You're looking good there.
Thank you. Nice to see you too.
Yeah, a lot of men and women, mostly women, have used your brand all over the world, I know, but you're still it's an interesting background of a company. You've gone through a lot of different things, and then you've come in to kind of reboot them and take them to the next level since, I think, 2017. So I think it would be awesome just to tell us kind of the Revive story, starting with Dr. Brown and the journey up until you. It's I think there's a lot of lessons learned here.
Sure, it's a 23-year journey, but I'll try and make it
Whoa, I didn't know it was that long.
As possible. Essentially, we'll start with the doctor. Dr. Brown was a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. He did his focus was really on burn wound healing. And it was through his research in burn wound healing that he started working with epidermal growth factor, which he found sped up the healing of wounds for burn victims, which was important to help people survive, especially bad burns. And he went on to become a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. And when women would come to see him for a facelift or an eye lift or whatever it was, he would say to them, tell me what it is you're looking for. And they would say, well, I want, healthy, glowing skin. And he would say, okay, great, but I can't give you that with a facelift. And so he kind of merged the thoughts of the research he had done with burn wound healing, which essentially just reproduced your skin at a healthy rate, with what he knew women were looking for. And he started making a cream with epidermal growth factor that he gave away in his practice. It ended up in the hands of somebody who knew the head of Neiman Marcus. And in 1997, that person said to him, if you can produce this commercially, we will launch you. And was born. And so for the first about 8 years or so, he ran the business out of his office. He was a doctor and he was running Revive simultaneously.
Was it always called Revive, or was it Dr. Brown's potion at one point or something?
It's always called Revive, and it's
rare.
A great question because lots of Dr. Brown's people call it their name.
I probably tried some of their stuff.
He always understood that it shouldn't be his name, actually, and it actually speaks volumes not only for his kind of instinct for brand, but also his personal humility. And the business got an enormous amount of attention. Honestly, everybody looked at it, Estee Lauder, L'Oreal, and ultimately it was acquired by a company called Gerwich Products, which simultaneously was purchased by Alticor.
Yes, I remember that well. Full disclosure, I was on the Alticor advisory board, part of Amway. They bought a lot of brands.
Yeah, and so he, I think, probably made one of the first classic, mistake. It went to the highest bidder, but not necessarily the bidder who knew what to do with it. And so the business was under Alticor for about 8 years, and combined with the brand Laura Mercier. And so really the focus was Laura Mercier, and Revive kind of languished. However, it wasn't ruined. So no bad distribution, no harm to formulas or anything like that. And in 2016, Laura Mercier was sold to Shiseido. And along with it, as a little gift, came Revive. And so as Laura Mercier was being integrated into Shiseido, people were just sort of being taken off Revive and nothing was kind of happening to it. So I work with a group called Tengram Capital Partners. I had run another portfolio company for them. We had just sold, and I was transitioning out of that business. And the partner that I work with kind of kept knocking on Shiseido's door saying, "What are you doing with that Revive business?
Yeah.
Why don't you do me?" So we actually first looked at it for a different purpose, and then realized that it could really stand alone on its own. And so it was a full carve out from Shiseido. We bought intellectual property and inventory, existing business relationships, but that was it.
Oh, wow. Wow. Having done a couple of spin outs myself, that's almost like a startup. First, you have the pain of doing the spin out, and then you've got to actually reboot it and start over.
Yeah.
Wow. So you've been through quite a journey since then.
Yeah, we call ourselves a 23-year-old startup, honestly. That's kind of how we created the culture. But the first 4 months, we worked through a transition services agreement with Shiseido. So you're
fulfillment distribution.
While you're building a company, but making all the decisions. But within 4 months, we were fully separated. And I was employee number 1 of NewCo, and we're now 25 people in our corporate office,
Nice.
Which is in people's homes at the moment.
Yeah, of course. What kind of culture is it now? That is a very turbulent story, if anything. So I know it's all new employees now, but is it Dr. Brown's back involved? So I actually remember meeting him once a long time ago. It's all coming back to me. But is it kind of like science technology company? Because I know you guys are grounded in science. Everybody walking around in lab coats, or is it a little different?
We don't wear lab coats, and not Dr. Brown either. But it's actually a mix, I would say, of science and art, if you will, and startup. So in terms of, one of the things, having done a few kind of turnarounds myself and working with some people that I've worked with in the past on some turnarounds, we didn't adapt the culture of uber luxury from an office perspective. We have kept a flat organization. We work in an open space. We kind of keep it luxury scrappy, as we like to say. And, everyone, it's a very transparent but active culture, and we move quickly, we make decisions quickly, and we try not to kind of get too caught up in ourselves. Yep. Dr. Brown is back involved with us. He's on our board. He's an investor. And so he is both a very humble and sophisticated person. He is an art collector. And there was a lot of art kind of in the brand previously, which we've brought back. And what we've tried to really mix together is this idea of the science of the formulas and the technology, but the humanity of him, honestly, as a doctor. And so one of the things that was lacking for a long time was just any kind of branding on the business, new product introductions, marketing of the brand, PR, et cetera. And so, we kind of work under the banner of the idea of the joy of skin renewal, joy being the humanity piece and skin renewal being the science piece.
I like that. You also say you're performance-based skincare.
Yes.
Luxury skincare, of course.
Yes.
Different price point. What does that mean, performance-based?
Performance is really one of the things, interestingly, when we were doing the diligence on the business is, for all intents and purposes, there wasn't a lot of inventory in stores. There hadn't been, a new product pipeline. It could have been dead, but it wasn't, because the one thing people said to us all the time is, this stuff works. It really works. And so there is an incredible amount of formula integrity, I would say. And for a small brand, I would say testing and research that goes into the products. So when we talk about performance, we're really talking about high levels of of active ingredients and very performing formulas. And then the luxury piece is really about service.
Oh, so and you cater to, I mean, besides, retail and e-commerce and such, you also go through spas and dermatologists. I've seen it in my dermatologist office before, so it has to have some integrity to pass through those channels usually. How do you find like managing all those channels? Some brands they just focus on the pro kind of brands, whether it's hair care, skincare, and others are more mass retail or specialty retail like a Sephora. And it seems like, are you in all of those at the same time?
No, I mean, I think the core of the brand is really department store.
Okay.
Originally was department store. It was Neiman Marcus exclusive US for about 3 years. And the footprint in the US is, Neiman Marcus, Saks Fifth Avenue, Bluemercury. Those were kind of the heritage retailers domestically. And there's much less from a dermatologist and, sort of spa distribution perspective. Where we've expanded greatly is e-commerce, first with our brick and mortar partners, and then of late with a lot of, not a lot, but with select pure play e-commerce partners, which there was no, kind of history of the brand at all in any of the e-commerce pure plays.
Yeah, I assume you've been talking about that. You've accelerated that in 2020. Does that mean you're all over Amazon too? I haven't searched yet.
Not Amazon, no. Okay. Not Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, they sell all kinds of things. I think I saw a hot tub there for 10 grand yesterday, so I assume you could sell luxury products.
Their demographic, is not different from. They have plenty of luxury customers.
Yes, they do. But you brought up retail, so let's dig into it. For over 2 years now, there's been the quote unquote retail apocalypse going on, and just accelerated by 2020. But for the untrained observer, it's been going on for a long time. And you often said something that it's like distribution is dead, I think is one of the Estee Lauder quotes. It's not pretty out there, especially with a lot of the retailers that you either used to sell through that are gone. What are you doing specifically to kind of counteract that in terms of in-store? I get the e-commerce stuff. You're all over it. It's awesome. Your site looks good.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, the first thing is you have to kind of stay one step ahead of retail as it's falling apart with you. So, for example, last year, obviously in fourth quarter, there was suddenly no more Barneys. Long before COVID, there were all kinds of political unrest in Hong Kong, and that had been a very big market for us also. And so, there are different kinds of pivots. One of them is, obviously, in addition to doing business from an e-commerce perspective, a very big piece of our business in store was done through events, inviting people in for personal consultations, for complimentary facials, for meetings with Dr. Brown. And we've actually had to essentially parallel path our entire services menu to be virtual as well. So we have done virtual master classes. We have done virtual one-on-one consultations, which we do offer. You can book it through our site. But with some of our retail partners, we've done events with Dr. Brown. So a customer will, can log on to a master class. We've done them with other brands, narrated by a retail partner. We've done them ourselves. Then you can have a personal consultation, either with our global esthetician or with Dr. Brown. So, there have been many different types of things that we've had to do.
Yeah, and just shifting the retail mix, I guess, would probably be the same. We've been talking to a lot of retailers on the program about how they're, rebooting the whole experience, and touchless is only one of 20 issues they've got. Getting people to casually shop again is taking time. It's taken off in China already, as you've already talked about on some other programs. But the what we're seeing, especially at the other Revive, the beauty tech companies, the whole ability to use your phone, both in store and online, to kind of do quick diagnostics, search for products, and not touch much in the stores, as well as try-ons and things. That It is. It's been booming. It's been up at about 200-300%, depending on what e-commerce site. The in-store stuff is ready to come back, but that could be probably a good pivot to China. So, in China, it's a huge part of your business, I think, as well as Chinese consumers used to come to this country and buy. But what are you seeing in China? What's the reboot been looking like there?
So you're 100% right. The brand's only been in China 18 months. We knew we needed to be there because of the customers we had at places like Bergdorf Goodman in New York City, Saks Fifth Avenue, New York City, Harrods in London. And so the fastest way to enter China is through cross-border e-commerce. And so that's how we entered. And within
So
a very
you're on Tmall then, and Little Red Book, tobacco,
yes,
stuff like that.
exactly. China has quickly become not only my biggest region outside of US, but if it were an individual account, bigger than any of my individual accounts.
Nice.
And you know what works in and as a result of that, because China is now representing about 25% of my total business, and it's all digital, it's forced the team to think differently. They don't think about, okay, so what does the beauty advisor say, and what does the tester unit look like, et cetera. You have to think about bringing a product to market 100% visually.
Right.
And then obviously verbally, but in a digital sense. And so, you know, one of the things that I think about luxury, you know, as this whole idea of distribution kind of changes is anybody can do digital, right? Anybody can take a picture, anyone can put it on social, but if your visual imagery is what's distinguishing you from your competitors, then actually the visual becomes more important than ever, or the animation becomes more important than ever. And so I do think that Chinese customers recognize that they're very sophisticated. And so how we present things and how we animate things and then how we explain them is a very big part of doing business in China. And we specifically work with a creative agency that has an expertise in sort of visualization around the world.
Yeah, that's critical, I think. Very, very digitally savvy consumers over there, depending on the age. Speaking of ages, what are you doing to target millennials, XYZ, kind of all the next gens?
A bunch of different things. The first was we didn't have any smaller size products in our line, even a few. And so the first thing that we did was introduce them. The team was very disappointed in the beginning when they weren't flying off the shelves, but we realized that there was no incentive for a beauty advisor to counter an entry price point if she's getting commissioned off the full size, et cetera. But now that we have so much more e-commerce business, not only on our own site, but on others, we absolutely see those smaller size products kind of rising to the top, and that's actually the case in China too.
So they want smaller sizes. They just don't want the big tubs.
As a gateway into a brand, but they will come back in. So that's one. The second is kind of looking at pricing among. Making sure that the offering is broad enough that there are products at different price points in the brand, both a little bit more entry, but there is also an uber luxury customer too, even a millennial uber luxury customer. So we kind of make sure that in a year, the calendar is balanced between focusing maybe on an entry as well as something much higher end. And then, access. We launched. There were no pure play e-commerce players in the brand at all when we first launched. So we've recently launched Be Glowing, Skin Store, Look Fantastic. Our own site has tripled in 3 years. There really wasn't a big e-commerce business for Revive itself. So kind of all of those things are things that we've done.
Right. And, being strong in e-commerce, having started 3 years ago, I assume that helped you through the early days of the pandemic when everything was shutting down and your channels were in disarray or closed. Let's just call it that. That
Yeah,
probably helped you propel through a little bit.
our site helped, but I do have to say, I mean, some of the retailers pivoted well themselves. And I give,
Right.
for example, Saks, I think has done an incredible job. They've been great communicators. They did a great job online. And yes, there was some level of promotionality, end of March, April into May. But some of those businesses are whole with the shift going very much online, but the total omni numbers are not down as much as you might think because they've ramped up their online piece.
Yeah, omni meaning omni-channel. Exactly. So well, you were well positioned there. No, it's I know you've talked about it on some other programs. I think you guys have done a great job. I mean, you were a good kind of triage trauma CEO. We
It's
went
funny
down.
you say the word triage because coming out of this culture of doing a complete carve out stand up, triage is actually a word that's in our culture. We used to do a triage at 9 every morning and at 5 every afternoon when we were in our transition services agreement. And it's actually, we went to once a day. And so, but we do triage as a team, and that's what it's called, every Monday morning at 9. There's a shared Google Doc. Everybody inputs something that's cross-functional that they need somebody else's help with. And it's how we start the week. We go through it. If something stays on triage for 3 weeks, or if it isn't updated, you're in trouble. We do it now virtually, and we kind of readopted some of that triage culture as part of being virtual with teams. There's a mandate on how often you have to check in with your team, et cetera.
Smart. Yeah, a lot of CEOs have experienced that from, startups to multi-billion-dollar multinationals where they've had to go down in the weeds, but purposefully doing it. On a couple of the boards I'm on, that shared Google Doc is like way too long. Between March and July, it was just never ended. So they've figured out how to like remanage it. Yeah, I think there's a good lesson there not to lose that culture from you guys. That's a good one. I actually like it. I like to talk a lot about, just growth and innovation on this program, the governance around that and how you approach it. And, looking forward, obviously you just want to get through the holiday season and get 2020 behind you, whatever that means. It doesn't mean what it used to, I know, but how do you approach growth and innovation, specifically around partnering? We talk a lot about build, buy, borrow. So you bought a company, but borrowing, the whole partnering thing and co-creating products either with customers or channels or what's your thought there?
Interestingly, I think in the past couple of months, I find in general that the beauty industry is very collegial. And as much as we compete, I do think that people are pretty relationship oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And doing brand partnerships actually had been something we were doing, but not so high on our priority list when we kind of looked at all of our other priorities. And we used this period to kind of reach out to friends who are CEOs, brands who are like-minded, and do some very low cost or almost no cost partnerships to help each other. Let's do sweeps. I'll post you, you post me, that kind of thing. And actually, those have turned out to be some of the most successful things we've done in terms of customer acquisition and social engagement, especially during this period. And so I think that's proven to be something that's really helpful for us as a brand, and a very fast way to kind of reach a new like-minded audience.
Yeah, fast and simple. Doesn't have to be that complicated. Can we talk about you a little bit? Is that all right? There's no rules here. So you had a big long corporate career like many of us, and then had switched. Got away from the dark side and kind of went to startups. Rather turbulent start of the startups. So you've been at L'Oreal, Avon, Estee Lauder. Even did a little stint at Kenneth Cole. What was it like for you? What was your journey like? Kind of leaving the big bureaucratic. We call them BFSs, the big fat slow companies, and doing Revive?
I mean, the first time was I wanted to do it. Somebody we mutually know was actually the person who encouraged me. She said, Elana, if you're going to work this hard, and travel all over the world and never be home, you should own a piece of something. And I kind of said,
that sounds like Pauline Brown to me.
That was Pauline Brown. But I said, I don't even know what that means. I'm a big company girl. And anyway, I learned. And the beginning was an incredible shock. I mean, I went from a corner office at Estee Lauder running global marketing on the Estee Lauder brand to running North America for a very small Israel-based skincare company. And it was a culture shock from
a culture shock. Yep.
A professional perspective, a personal, every perspective. And I, for months thought I had made the worst mistake of my life. But the reality is that, for me personally, the, seeing and feeling the excitement and the effort that you put into something every day, there's nothing else, kind of like it. You also learn a lot very quickly, whether you want to or you don't. You make a ton of mistakes. You hope they're not fatal ones to your business. And, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So
it sounds like the Israeli company, which is your first startup, was really your dress rehearsal. It really prepared you for this, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was, this is the second investment I've done with Tengram Capital Partners. I also ran a company for them called Laura Geller. And they basically, the partner who I work with said, I never hire, I don't train CEOs. I don't train CEOs on my dime. They've had to do big company, but then they've had to do a small company. So yes, Ahava was my dress rehearsal, but it's what got me to working with Tengram, which was great because I work with them in an operating perspective, but I've also worked with them in an advising perspective and served on a couple of boards for them too.
Yeah, they're a good private equity group. So we've got people listening both on the corporate side as well as on the startup side. Most of the startup people aren't thinking of going back to corporate, but some do. Kind of like you did for a little bit. What do you say to those that are kind of maybe they're still in that addictive corner office environment, albeit from home? What do you say to them about just encouraging them to take that leap, that entrepreneurial leap, if you will?
Sure. People kind of ask me that all the time and ask for my advice. And, what I always tell people is that you have to kind of find a way to look deep within yourself and see what it is that is going to keep you kind of professionally stimulated and sustained. And if it's being in a corporate environment, and there are a lot of pluses to it. There are resources. There is, kind of continuous learning opportunities. There are big teams. There are a lot of pluses. If that's what is meaningful to you, then that's where you should stay. But if you, want to see the fruits of your labor quickly, and if you want to own your own decisions, and if you want to spend time on work as opposed to politics, so you can kind of see where my bent is, then the entrepreneur, doing something in a smaller environment that gives you a little bit more visibility is probably for you. And I like the private equity model because I always feel like everyone's aligned. There's and the measurements are obvious. There's not a subtext, and everyone's kind of aligned towards the same end.
Not a lot of hidden agendas. Common enemy strategies definitely help. Elana, I really want to thank you for being on the program. It's been insightful for a lot of the viewers. And if you were to just looking ahead, what's next? We got Christmas season coming up, 2021. I know it's hard to plan right now. It's hard to act normal, but What's next for you?
The one thing I've personally, had to realize now spending 5 months at home is we're not going back to where we came from. And I was good for a couple of months thinking like, this is a crisis, but we're going to go back. And I've had to kind of let that go completely. We aren't going back to what it was. And so the sooner I think that people kind of allow themselves to let go of that and then look at business differently, I think the better they'll feel personally, and the faster their companies will kind of morph. And so it's hard to imagine, making up the business we used to do in stores somewhere else, but we will. And so, and I don't only think it's e-commerce. I do think that people still crave human interaction. I think it's just going to have to happen in a much more personalized, one-on-one way.
Yeah, that kind of takes us back to how we started talking about Amway. The MLM model, as some of us know, we're probably going to have them on soon. It's not
digital
going away.
MLM. I'm telling you, that's
I'm coming up with a new hashtag for that. You've been listening to Elana Drell Szyfer, the CEO of Revive. Thanks for joining us today. Hope to see you soon. Maybe in person next time.
Thanks. It was a pleasure. Good to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.